Hey there, everybody. It's been a bit. I lost one of my dogs about a month ago, so I have had to take care of myself. But Milo, getting very big. He is a very good boy. He takes very good care of me. So, in any case, we're going to continue with the legend of Huma. By the triumvirate, how much more can they possibly throw at us? Guy Avondale shook his head. Evil always grows abundant when given the chance to take root. Melodramatic statement by my predecessor, but all too true. They stood in the courtyard where the dragons their riders had landed. The loss of 2 of their elite number disturbed the Grand Master, as did news of yet another wave of evil rising towards them. What of this deal with the followers of Nuatari, Huma? Asked Bennett. Can they be trusted in your opinion? After deep thought, Huma finally answered. I believe so. He held up the tiny emerald globe. It pulsated. They gave this, granted it might be a means for them to draw us out so we fall to them in the open field, but it was accompanied by an oath to the god of dark magic himself. No black robe with a desire to live will cross Nuatari. I agree, added the Grand Master. He sighed. Well, we have quite a problem. We cannot possibly defend Vingard for too long against a siege of this intensity. At the same time, it would be a simple madness to go out and meet that horde. He hesitated, and then added, I offered the dragons the chance to depart if they felt the cause was lost here. Lord Oswald held up a hand to silence his anxious compatriots. I had to ask. I believe, though, that they will stay with us until the end. We shall see. Or was I? We still do not know all about the East. The ogres are said to be stabilizing there. We can look for no help from the south. Blast the elves. In the north, water. We have the fake dragon lances, interrupted Bennett. Let us use them in one final assault. In the confusion of the foe, a few of them will buy time, if nothing else. Lord Oswald grunted and stared at the lances of the riders. I think insanity rules the day, but unless there are other suggestions, we shall combine the epic charge my nephew so desperately craves with a coordinated search for and attack on the castle of Galandrakos. He looked round. No one, not even Lord Avondale, cleric and veteran soldier, could oppose the suicidal strategy. Oswald shook his head. If I am remembered at all, it will probably be as the Grand Master cursed for sending his men to the slaughter. A horn sounded. They've spotted the first wave, someone said anxiously. Knights suddenly were moving all about. Horses were being readied and lined up. Row upon row of knights formed. Pikemen, lancers, bowmen, each and every type moved to assure that there was no disorder in this hour of peril. I'm having a difficult time tonight. I'm sorry. Break out the footmen's lances, shouted the Grand Master to one of his aides. The man saluted hastily and went to inform the squires whose job it would be. Huma wanted to order the remaining dragon lancers into battle formation, but Lord Oswald prevented him. No. If you hope to break through and make your way to the mountains, you'll have to go when the dragons are engaged. But the ground forces will receive as much protection as they can get from the dragons. The horn sounded again, a different note this time. What in the name of Kirijolith is that? The Grand Master and the others hurried towards the front, where Lord Hawkeye was in direct command. Lord Hawkeye, the ruling knight of the Order of the Crown whirled. Grand Master, they've come to a halt, just in sight. Even the dragons have stopped, as if they're waiting for something. I've put everybody on standby. Very good. Huma held his breath until the Grand Master relaxed the evident strain on his face. They're going to play with our minds. They want us to come out charging to meet them. The abysmal fools. We can't be tricked into such an easy death. Let them sweat a little. Let them wait. When Galandrakos or his mistress runs out of patience, then we will make our move. A gold dragon fluttered from a spire down to the courtyard. He was old even for a dragon, for his hide was cracked and covered with ancient battle scars. There was no weakness in his form, though. I conveyed to the others your earlier offer. The voice was deep and rumbling, a bit like the earth elemental that had served mages. The knights became silent. Lord Oswald had hesitated, but now he asked, And what was their response? The dragon gave him a look that could only be described as "I told you so." "We will not abandon you. Without Vingard Keep, the outposts will not stand. This is the place of decision. If Vingard falls, then Ergoth falls. Then the Elfin lands and the Dwarven lands fall, and the Queen rules all. Only sought to keep the cause of Paladin alive if we failed here. The cause for good will always live. Even Takesis must know that." Despite the activity around them, it was as if all sound had ceased for the group. Huma understood that the dragons had committed themselves to a battle to the death, for the sake of their human allies, for the sake of their belief in the teachings of Paladin. The Grand Master did something unprecedented then. He went down on one knee and paid homage, not to that particular dragon, but to all of its kind. With the way of freedom open, they were remaining. "Thank you. I hoped, but one never knows." The gold dragon gave a majestic nod, spread its lengthy wings, and departed skyward. The Grand Master watched quietly, then turned at a new sound. Squires bearing the simulated dragon lances for footmen rushed towards the assembled knights. Huma stared at the lances that were removed from their boxes. How they glowed! It was as if... "My lord!" Huma surprised himself as he interrupted the Grand Master. "Yes, Huma?" "If you'll excuse me, there's some things I must prepare." "Then go." "Kaz," Huma pulled the Minotaur aside. "Retrieve one of the lances the squires are passing out and compare it to one of the real dragon lances." "What?" The Minotaur got no further. "I'll explain when I return." Huma rushed away, leaving the Minotaur to puzzle over his comrade's request. The smithy itself was only a short distance away, just out of sight of the Grand Master and the others. Even as Huma approached it, the massive wooden doors swung forwards, and Huma stepped back quickly, coming face to face with a stranger. "It would be best to avoid standing near doors if you do not wish to injure yourself." The newcomer had silver-black hair and narrow, long head. His eyes seemed to burn for a moment, and Huma was reminded of the figure who had stared at Gwyneth the one night that they had walked the courtyard. She had been afraid of that man. This could not be the same person, though. This one was taller and thinner. But the eyes... "You are Huma of the Lance," the stranger decided. His eyes were piercing. "I am Huma." The knight was no bard's hero that he should carry such a title as that. "The master smith has been busy, but I think he can spare a bit of time for you." The smile was odd, so alien that Huma shivered. What was he reminded of? Voices carried from inside. Both were familiar, but one especially so. "Can you give me no advice? I have been away from the world of men much too long, and my time on Kryn is almost done. Best you should seek one of your own." "None of them understand. How am I to tell him that I am not what he thinks I am? That I've flown with him nearly every day without him realizing it? Do you think he could love me if he knew There was little light, save around the forge, and that only served to silhouette the two figures standing there. "Gwyneth?" The one figure, female, turned at his voice, uttered a gasp, and fled through near a doorway. Huma made to follow, but the remaining figure blocked his way and greeted him heartily. "Huma, how good it is to see you one last time!" Duncan Ironweaver lifted him high, shook him like a babe, and set him down again. Huma glanced behind the towering smith, but there was no sign of where Gwyneth had gone. "You actually thought I'd leave you with only 20 lances? Ha! Lad, you surprise me." "Then they are real. It isn't my imagination." "Not hardly. I had many, many more than 20, but not situated near. Besides, you would never have been able to bring them all back. Too many of her spies about. Besides, I needed the trip." "And the smithy?" Duncan Ironweaver indicated the work area. "They were in need of a master armorer and a weaponry expert. I bent the truth a little and said you would summon me from the south, which, in a sense, you did. They were understandably impressed with my work and let me take over. Soon it was just me and my assistants." It's incredible! All this time, real dragonlances were being created in the smithy? The huge smith tapped his chest. "You've proven to them that the dragonlances work, Huma. I don't think even your illustrious Grand Master realizes just how many of those men believe in the lances." Huma's mind began to spin. Saddles! We'll need more saddles." "Kildith!" For the first time, Huma noticed the smith's assistants, an elf, a human, and the dwarf who was evidently Kildith, as it was he who stepped forward. Master Ironweaver? Are the saddles nearby? The dwarf broke into a grin, much like the smith's. The dwarf was well-whiskered and, though he appeared quite ancient, moved with the speed and grace of one in his prime. More than enough to go round. Fine, fine. Duncan Ironweaver walked over to Huma and put a hand on his shoulder. The knight felt himself politely, but forcibly, being steered away. Master Ironweaver, one question. Gwyneth, that's between you and her. The change in expression on the smith's face was enough to quiet Huma. Remember, you have the lances now. Make use of them. Huma was out of the door before he could say goodbye. The one-armed smith flexed his mechanical limb. Paladin be with you, lad. Even the lances cannot help you if you truly lose faith. The horns sounded a new warning. Huma bolted. All other questions receded in the face of battle. The dragon lances were real. Kaz met him carrying a footman's lance in each hand. Is this some trick? Huma, I'd swear. They're real. They're all real. Where is Lord Oswald? The Minotaur used one of the lances as a pointer. On the wall. He insisted on seeing it for himself. Huma turned and caught sight of Bennett organizing the riders. Huma hailed him. Bennett barked out one last order and then joined him. What is it? Every muscle in the face of the Grandmaster's nephew was alive. Bennett was in his element and unconsciously reveling in it. The dragon lances, they're all real. The other knights looked at him quizzically. Of course they're real. Huma hesitated. Bennett had never been told the original plan. No one at that time had known that Duncan Ironweaver was going to appear. Bennett waited silently until Huma at last let the tale come tumbling out. The Knight of the Sword's visage slowly froze into an unreadable mask. When Huma finally finished, the two stared at one another. The predatory eyes of Bennett flickered to where the rank and file of the knighthood had gathered to await commands. His eyes quickly returned to Huma. Was there anything else? I have much more to do. The flat, toneless words shocked Huma. He had expected anger and surprise, but nothing. Bennett! His sentence was cut off by an unblinking look from the other. Bennett indicated the knights around them. Does what you say make any real difference, Huma? Whether the dragon lances existed or not, these men would still be readying for battle, despite the probable outcome. I would be first among them, as I think you would be too. Any damage we create, any strength we cost them, even in defeat, is a victory of sorts. He took a breath, and some of the fanaticism faded from his eyes. It does please me to have reaffirmed that we will not go naked into the maw, but that is all. Tell them that the dragon lances are of no use. They will still march out and give the enemy their all. Would you yourself act any different? The faith Bennett had always displayed in the past took on new meaning to Huma now. He knew that the other knight was correct in his assumptions, especially where Huma himself was concerned. No matter how terrible the odds, one of the first knights at the foremost would have been Huma. Now, if you'll excuse me, there is much that still needs to be done. You should find my uncle up there. Bennett indicated a portion of the wall to their right. I think he'll be happy to hear your news. Bennett walked off, shouting orders as he went, and acting as if the conversation had never happened. Huma stirred and hurried off towards the walls. At the top of the wall, the Grandmaster was standing on an observation ledge. Lord Oswald heard him approach and glanced his way. When he saw it was Huma, he said, "There's movement over there. Something is forming in the sky." It was only a small blot in an overcast sky far beyond the oncoming army, but, once sighted, it held the viewer's attention, as nothing else in the heavens could. Huma felt as if a part of him were being wrenched towards that blot, as if his soul itself was being drawn to it. He caught his breath and tore his eyes away. What is it? The Grandmaster shook his head. I don't know, but it drives the dragons and the ogres towards us, I think. Huma recalled his reason for coming here and quickly informed Oswald of what he had discovered. The elder knight acted even before Huma had finished. To his aides he shouted, "Alert all commanders! The dragons! Someone must alert the dragons! Have the ranks ready themselves!" Turning back toward the oncoming horde, Lord Oswald shook his head. Even as they watched, the dragons of darkness were beginning to pull ahead of the ground forces. They would be here much too soon. "My lord," Huma said urgently, "let me take the original riders. We will delay the enemy while the others prepare. Send them up in groups of 20, but have them wait above the keep until their numbers are great. Then send them out, followed by the footmen. If we gain control of the air, the ground will also be ours." "You'll be dead!" The younger knight hesitated only for a second. then I will have given my life over to Paladin as any knight should do. Oswald nodded wearily. Huma hurried back down, wondering just how long it would take to gather the others. To his surprise, however, he found them all waiting, riders seated and lances at the ready. In the short time that they had been together, the group had become one entity. The silver dragon was there, too, waiting for Huma's orders. In the deadly calm that can occur before battle, Huma stood before his assembled band and explained the danger of their mission and the likely outcome. He expected opposition, voices of dry logic that would tear down his plan. Instead, he was stunned to discover that they believed in what he proposed, though their lives might be forfeit. Bennett nodded in approval, and even some of the dragons indicated their agreement. Oddly, only his own mount gave no response. She appeared withdrawn, though she also made no protest when he climbed on her back. When he gave the signal to depart, she obeyed with speed and coordination, if not enthusiasm. Once in the air, Kaz and Bolt edged closer. "We shall make them remember us well before we perish. Mark me on that, Huma." "We must seek out Dracos," Huma replied. "He is the key to everything." "He and his dark mistress." Huma nodded. When they were high up, Lord Avondale, who was peering to the southwest, suddenly pointed. "Look, there! Do you see anything?" Bolt was the first to reply. "It is another army! The enemy grow even stronger!" Avondale laughed at that. "It is we," he shouted, "who grow even stronger." It was the northern Urgothian army. Knowing that only defeat and slavery awaited them if the knighthood fell, they were risking all in the hope of making a lightning strike at the foe from the rear. They had not been noticed thus far by the servants of Takesis, and was good fortune indeed. "How long before the others will be aloft?" shouted Avondale. "Not long." It was Bennett who shouted the response, for which Huma was grateful. He would not have wanted to guarantee anything at this point. Even as they spoke, the group was moving closer to intercept the first of the dragon scouts. They kept in tight formation, knowing too well that individually they would be cut down. It seemed that the dark dragons realized their intentions, for some moved accordingly. Others, however, were obviously of different opinions as to what the knights were capable of and broke away from the rest, speeding towards their enemies. Huma could not help smiling briefly. As the evil dragons bared teeth and claw and challenged the newcomers, he realized that they did not believe in the strength of the dragon lances. All but a few of the attackers perished in minutes. Most of them skewered themselves on the lances of Huma and his companions. 2 more died before Huma signaled for his band to allow the survivors to escape. They would bring their terror to the dragons who had waited. Huma glanced briefly at his comrades. Kaz was flushed and full of life. Bolt could barely restrain himself from chasing the survivors. Lord Avondale stared towards his army. Boron was quiet and almost expressionless. His arm had healed, and he was keeping the dragon lances as steady as he could. Or the dragon lance. Scores of manned dragons came to meet them. Red, black, green, and blue. White dragons also charged, but they were without riders, and Huma suspected that they were to be fodder, for they worked more by animal cunning than intelligence, and this environment was not suited for them at all. Though smaller than the other dragons, they could be deadly, and their presence would buy an advantage for the Dragon Queen. Below, the course of the 2 armies had altered. The Urgothians were forming a long, wide line, and the southern portion of the ogre forces was turning to meet this new threat. The northern half, having yet to learn of the attack, began to pull away, leaving the middle to scatter about as warriors sought their proper orders. Confusion seemed to be spreading. "Now!" Huma shrieked in his head. "We should be attacking now!" Of course, the knights in the keep could not see the Urgothian army, but they most certainly saw the splintering of the ogres and realized that something to their benefit was occurring. How long before they reacted? Then the tiny group of lancers met the first of seemingly endless waves of foes, and there was no time to think of anything but their survival. At first, dragons seemed to appear and disappear each time Huma blinked. There were screams all about him. It became as black as the abyss and bright as the sun, for the dragons unleashed their various magics, and riders, some of whom were clerics or sorcerers, added their own powers to the battle. As the silver dragon dodged a blow from an attacker, Huma saw one of the lancers and his mount fall prey to a band of at least 6 dragons. Rider and mount vanished beneath the terrible power of the creatures, and it was all Huma could do to not scream at their brave deaths. In the chaos, he could not identify who had perished. They were becoming separated. Kaz and Bolt still remained with Huma and the silver dragon. At one point, the knight heard the powerful voice of Guy Avondale as he shouted something. A fearsome black bearing one of the black guard came diving from above. Huma shouted at the silver dragon, but she was hopelessly engaged with the red dragon, who was pushing the dragon lance deeper and deeper into his own shoulder, too furious to even realize it. The knight pulled out his sword, useless against such a dragon, and prepared himself for the impact. Suddenly, there was a silver streak, and a sleek dragon intercepted the black. There was a rider on the silver dragon's back, and Huma realized it was Boron, the other knight already having been struck more than once. Blood stained his armor and his mount. Pain! Huma fell back as something sent shockwaves through his leg. He stared down at the blood flowing from a deep wound. The leg twitched, and shockwaves continued to assault his mind. Through tear-covered eyes, he caught sight of an ogre straddling a dragon. With strength beyond that of a human, the ogre had attacked with an axe, and his blow had been lucky. Huma deflected another blow from the ogre, but felt himself unable to concentrate. The pain demanded too much. To his relief, the silver dragon was at last able to push away her own adversary. The red, weakened by the loss of so much blood from so many wounds, fluttered helplessly towards the ground, taking his hapless rider with him. Huma! It took him a few moments to realize the silver dragon was calling to him. She looked at him with eyes filled with terrible fear, and not for herself. She had seen eyes like that before, but... His thoughts were interrupted by a renewal of cries from all around. His first thought was that this was the end, that more dragons were coming to join the ones already attacking the small band. But he was wrong. The dragons he saw as he looked up and all around were gold, silver, all the bright metallic colors of the dragons of Paladin. There were more than 100, and each had a rider and a knight, armed with a lance that gleamed brightly and aimed true. The dragon lances. There was a mass of confusion among the dark dragons. If they had been told anything, they had been told that there were but a handful of dragon lances. The nearest of the dragons perished without raising claws in defense, so disbelieving were they. Huma put a hand to his brow and came away with blood. His own. He wondered when that had happened, and how. Thinking of injuries, he began looking down at his leg. The blood was flowing freely still, and he knew that he would pass out soon if he didn't do something to stop it. The silver dragon began to pull away from the fighting. More and more dragons were coming out of the keep. How many dragon lances had the smith made? The silver dragon flew as if pursued by the Dark Queen herself. She would glance back in his direction every now and then, that same fearful look in her eyes. He frowned and clamped his hands down against the leg wound in order to staunch the flow. At last, they flew over the keep walls, narrowly avoiding another set of riders rising, and she brought him to where the other survivors of his band were being treated. "Take him from me!" The dragon's voice was so commanding, so harsh that no one dallied. Huma lost sight of her and the world as a whole. When he awoke, Gwyneth was over him, cleaning the wound, touching with her hands in a way that deadened the pain. He could almost feel power flowing from her fingertips. Her face was pale and covered partially by her hair as she leaned over the leg. Huma's eyes wandered. They were on a hill away from the fighting, but not so far that they could no longer hear the sounds of battle. Avondale was there, his left side a bloody mess. Kaz was nowhere to be seen. Of the original band, only 9 remained. Bennett, uninjured, but looking as if he and his armor had been dragged across the plains, was staring at Gwyneth with an emotion somewhere between revulsion and fascination. His eyes briefly met Huma's, then turned swiftly away. "Boron is dead, Huma," Oswald's nephew finally said, his gaze still on Gwyneth. "The last I saw, he and his dragon took that black dragon to save... took on that black one to save you, but they perished." This last shook not only Huma but Gwyneth as well. She removed her hands from the wound and cried in them. Huma reached out and touched her arm. "It's not Boron she weeps for." Bennett was having trouble finding the right words. "Let it be, Bennett." Guy Avondale tried to rise. "Huma!" Bolt flew into sight, with Kaz waving his battle-axe in greeting. Both dragon and minotaur were covered in scratches and minor wounds, but neither seemed to be weakened by them. Huma glanced at them only momentarily, then his eyes returned to Gwyneth. She looked away. He continued to stare at her, even when he finally responded to Bennett's statement. "What do you mean, Bennett? What are you trying to say?" The hawk-like features of Bennett swerved towards the Urgothian cleric commander. "Everyone else saw it. Why hide it? If she cannot tell him, someone surely will. He needs to know. I know he needs about her. I know how he feels about her." "It is between them!" Avondale was furious. "Stop it!" The words were from Gwyneth. She rose, all the while staring at Huma, her arms hung limply by her side. Avondale slumped back suddenly. He glanced at Bennett and Kaz. "You two, help me up. A chill is coming over me. I need to move somewhere less open." Reluctantly, Kaz and Bennett helped him rise, and the three moved off. Gwyneth finally spoke. "I weep for Boron. I weep for any who fall fighting the Dragon Queen." "As have I." She tried to smile. "I weep especially for the dragon Boron rode, the silver one." Brother to his own, Huma recalled. Why would Gwyneth cry so for one dragon? She stared moodily around. The area had been emptied. As Huma looked puzzled, her features softened. "Before I tell you this, know that I love you, Huma. I would never do anything to harm you." "I love you too." The words seemed to flow so easily all of a sudden. "I think you may change your mind," she said enigmatically. Huma did not have time to ask what she meant, for Gwyneth was suddenly aglow, almost like the Dragonlance's. As he watched in horrid fascination, her face elongated and her nose and mouth grew into a toothy snout. Huma thought of witchery and rose to help her, but his leg was not yet well yet, and the head wound had not been salved. He slumped to the ground. Her long, slim arms grew even longer and more muscular. Her small hands twisted and turned, becoming terrible claws. She fell onto all fours and seemed to grow and grow and grow. Something wiggled and moved on her back. She was no longer even remotely human, and what she did resemble caused the knight to shake his head again and again. Her garments vanished to Paladin knows where, but she had no more need of them in her present form. The odd wiggling and moving on her backside came from two great humps that burst open, revealing bat-like wings. They spread wide, and in moments the transformation was complete. The thing that had been Gwyneth stepped forwards, tall, straight, and frightened. It was a dragon. A silver dragon. His. The silver dragon's eyes were downcast. "Huma, in Paladin's name, please say something." The voice was unmistakably Gwyneth's. He looked up into that reptilian face and saw the fear in it, fear that he would reject her. Huma could not say what was truly going on through his own mind. Everything seemed to be tumbling down around him. This could not be Gwyneth, could it? "You saw my brother that night, as you saw the other who served Duncan Ironweaver. Dragons both, but in human form. We admire you so, Huma, you and your kind. In your short lives you accomplish so much." Huma said nothing. Involuntarily, he pulled himself slightly farther from her. It was not out of fear, but out of confusion. She did not interpret it that way, and her words spilled out faster. Even as she spoke, her form reverted, the wings shriveled, her forelimbs smoothed and twisted until they were once more human, and she was able to stand. Her body shrank rapidly, as if the huge form were melting before his horrified eyes. The face grew smaller and rounder, and the great maw of the dragon dwindled down to the full, perfect lips. Hair of shimmering silver came sprouting from the dragon's head, cascading down the back. Huma nearly fled. The metamorphosis he had witnessed could not be real. "My brother told me that what I did not see at first, that I had fallen prey to what has happened to only a few others in the past. I'd lived among you for so long that I had come to love as you do." "Why?" She frowned, unsure exactly what he was asking, and then replied, "You embody the very beliefs of Paladin. You are brave and kind, never hateful. I came to love for you, nothing else." "Ah, the happy lovers." The cold, triumphant voice woke Huma from his stupor. He could not be here. Not here. Gallandracos, looking much as he had earlier, materialized before the knight and the dragon maiden and smiled. "I would have made my presence known sooner, but I did not care to interrupt such a beautiful scene." Gwyneth gave a cry that no human could have been capable of, and would have struck him, but Huma was already moving and barred her way. The knight succeeded in taking only a few steps before his leg gave out and he fell to the ground. Only then did he remember that the figure before him was an illusion. He silently cursed his own stupidity. The renegade laughed. "I've come to add to your miseries, Huma. I've come to repay you for the loss of Crinus. I must admit his insanity grew unpredictable in the end, but he was my best commander, and I shall miss him. Pity. Kaz and Bennett, alerted by the voice of one they knew all too well, came racing round the corner. The illusory Dracos raised a hand, and they halted as if striking a wall. An eye for an eye, you pathetic mortal. Dracos raised his hands, and something began to materialize before them. It was not until it was nearly fully formed that Huma recognized it. Magus! They had tortured him. His face was a bloody pulp, and one eye was swollen shut. His robes were in tatters, and Huma was surprised to see that they were white, not red. One arm was bent at an impossible angle, and neither leg seemed in the least bit functional. Magus forced himself up with his good arm. Huma! Several of his teeth were missing. I was right. In the end. Dracos smiled indulgently. He babbles like that occasionally. With great effort, Magus turned round and spat on the garments of the renegade. Gallant Dracos became furious and stretched an open palm towards his captive. Magus screamed as his body rippled from the renegade's torture. Gwyneth moved forward. Test your spells against me, gallant Dracos. The phantasm smiled nastily. I have more power than you could possibly believe, but I do not choose to use it now. I have merely come to show Huma the foolishness of his dreams of victory. Huma rolled forwards, desperately trying to reach his tortured friend. Magus shook his battered head. Don't, Huma, there's no reason anymore. Just defeat Dracos, that's all I ask. Dracos raised both hands towards Magus. Your time is up, my friend. With a gesture, the renegade sent shafts of green light at his captive. The shafts seemed to pass through Magus, and he screamed as if each were a steel lance. He wavered just a moment, then toppled forwards to lie in a heap, very real at Huma's feet. His death was no illusion. Huma shouted and struggled to move. The others stepped forward, but Dracos was already fading out of existence. The price of defiance, Knight of Solamnia. The price you all will be paying before long unless you embrace my mistress. No, renegade, the knight said, raising himself high. If anyone pays a price, it will be you. He could not tell if Dracos heard him, for the last was said to empty air. Bennett and Kaz stumbled forwards. The Minotaur was the first to speak. Huma, are you all right? Without answering, Huma looked intensely at the crumpled form of Magus. If you seek vengeance, Huma, I will gladly stand at your side. Kaz had never cared for the magic user, but he had, in the end, gained a respect for him. Huma shook his head. Vengeance is not the way, he raised an arm. Help me over to him. They did. It was odd, but now Magus looked at peace. He certainly had never looked this calm in life. Putting the mage's head down softly, Huma gritted his teeth and rose by his own power. Bennett and Kaz waited to assist him, but he waved them off. When he finally stood, Huma turned to face the three. I need your help, all three of you. It is time that the balance be restored. It is time that Dracos and his Dark Lady learn that where there is evil, there must also be a balance with good. Magus was living proof of that. In his time, he wore the robes of all three orders, ending with the white of Solinari. From evil to good, the pendulum swings both ways. And it is time it swung to our side. You intend to seek out the castle? Asked Bennett. I do. I ask your help, and that of any surviving from our band. If you hesitate, I will understand, for it is surely suicide. Kaz seemed ready to burst with indignation. If you expect me to turn from any battle, especially this one, you know nothing of my people. I may not be a knight of Solamnia, he ignored the sharp look from Bennett, but I know when I must fight, and I will join you. Bennett nodded. I will come. I'm sure those who can still ride will stay the same. Give me a few minutes alone then, Bennett. Please tell the Grandmaster what has occurred here. I would like him to give Magus a proper funeral no matter what occurs. As you wish. Both the Minotaur and the knight departed. Huma stared at the body of Magus, remembering simpler times. He was interrupted by a female voice. What of me, Huma? We were interrupted by this tragedy. I do not ask for a response to my feelings. I do not even hope that you can return my love. I will say this. In the matter of Galen Dracos and Kryn, I am still your partner. When you fly into the maw of the Dragon Queen, it will be I who will carry you. She waited for a response. Huma could say nothing. "I will be waiting, ready when you are." He heard footsteps then. They faded until he could hear nothing more. Huma did not move from the spot until the clerics from the temple came to carry Magius to a place where his body could rest. Huma limped towards the group. All of the original members who could still ride were ready. There were 8 men in all and 8 dragon steeds. Lord Avondale could not accompany them because of his wounds, but he was there to see them go. Huma spoke first to Avondale. "Any word on your men?" "Bogged down, but still very much alive. Your Grand Master has released the ground forces. They are advancing, and the ogres have ground to a halt." Huma nodded numbly. He heard only part of what the Argothian was saying. The renegade's killing of Magius had been a desperate act, an attempt to break Huma's spirit. Indeed, he felt broken and confused as he entered into this, his important and shining hour. "Wish us luck, cleric." "I'll do better than that." Avondale reached up to his own neck and tugged on a chain. As he pulled it over his head, a medallion, buried under his armor and clothing, came into view. "Lean forwards." Huma did. Avondale placed the medallion round his neck. "You are more deserving of this than I." The knight took the medallion in one hand and gazed at it. A representation of Paladin stared back at him. The medallion seemed uncomfortably warm in his hand. My gratitude." "Do not thank me. Find Dracos." Huma nodded and rose. The others were all mounted. Huma walked over to the silver dragon. He started to say something to her, thought better of it, and mounted. Someone handed him his lance. He noted that the footman's lance was again strapped to the silver dragon. On his signal, they rose into the air, determined to make their way past the enemy and seek out the stronghold of the mage. Huma held up the small greenish sphere and concentrated. He willed it to lead them to the citadel. The sphere glowed brightly, rose from his hand, and began to fly towards the mountains to the west. The 8 pairs followed. The battle was turning into a slaughter. The dragons, spurred by their fear of their masters, charged again and again at the lancers. They were repulsed each time with heavy losses. More than a fifth of the lancers and their mounts had perished in the meantime, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The ground forces had also suffered, especially at first. Once they learned of the effectiveness of their lances, however, casualties dwindled. Soon no dragon dared come near. Their magic and breath weapons still rained chaos in the nights, but there was a limit to those powers, and many of the Dark Queen's children became easy prey for flying lancers, so greatly had they exhausted themselves. Despite their intentions, Huma and his band could not avoid the battle completely. It was too widespread by now. More than once they swooped down to help a remnant that was in danger of being overrun. The children of Takesis were in no way defeated, though. They had formed into groups and were charging whatever point seemed the weakest. Already many had broken through and were heading towards the keep. They would be in for a surprise, Huma knew. The Grand Master was no novice. More than 50 knights and dragons were ready to fly at a moment's notice. Below them, the ogres and their allies were a mass of confusion. They were now being forced to fight a war on 2 fronts, for the Argothians had found good ground and were harrying the southern flank with great success. The sky suddenly became dark all around them, and Huma and his companions were filled with a sense of terrible oncoming evil. Lightning bolts moved with terrifying accuracy, striking dragons and riders, leaving few remains. The advancing dragon lancers faltered and were pushed back. The children of the Dark Queen began to fight with new energy. Huma slammed a fist against the lance shield. How did one fight a storm? No mage had created this. He put a hand over his eyes. If he had a target, a physical target, then he might be able to do something. But what could even the Dragonlance do against the elements? His question was answered even as he entered the heart of the storm. The presence of evil was so great that Huma could almost picture the Dragon Queen before him, hurling the rain and lightning towards him. A flash of lightning struck close behind him, and Huma heard a scream. By now he could not tell whether it was the rain or tears that dripped down his face. The Dragonlance suddenly burst into such brilliance that he was forced to close his eyes momentarily. From the shouts around him, he gathered that the same thing was occurring to his companions. When his eyes had recovered, Huma dared open them, and continued opening them until they were wide with disbelief. The storm clouds were dispersing rapidly. To his shock, Huma found the sun shining bright upon his armor. Was that right? By all calculations, it would be late day. The sun should be setting, yet here it was, high in the sky. No one on either side needed a more dramatic sign of which way the battle was going. The dragons of darkness lost their momentum, backtracked, and began to retreat from the fight in ones and twos. Even the powerful fear of their mistress was not sufficient to deter them. Paladin was proving to be the greater of gods. The ogres, though, fought with near berserk fury. The dragons might flee to fight another day, but not the ogres and their human allies. There was nowhere they could hide that the knights could not hunt them down. For them, it was victory or nothing. Kaz and Bennett rode to each side and a little back of Huma. Huma fingered the medallion given to him by Lord Avondale. The warmth remained strong, and, on impulse, he leaned forwards and touched it to the dragonlance. A surge of strength channeled through him. The mountains were directly ahead. Somehow the green sphere had stayed with them all that time, unaffected by the storm or the Dragon Queen's fury. Huma became alert for any sign of a castle. There was no telling how near they might be, and the castle certainly would not be undefended. Suddenly, a burst of energy shot from one of the smaller peaks to the southwest. Huma turned to face it, hoping the lance would break its power. When the burst was met by another, the two cancelled one another out. Huma's gaze shot to the source of the second burst. Even as he watched, the groups on the two peaks began to battle in earnest. After a few seconds of watching, Huma understood. He smiled grimly and turned to Kaz. "The Blackrobes are making their move. They've turned on Galacdracos and his band." He repeated the message to Bennett, who passed it on to the stalwarts behind them. A dozen red dragons, each bearing a rider, rose suddenly from within the mountains. The riders were all clad in black, and, to the horror of Huma and his companions, each had a dragon lance. They had, no doubt, lifted them from the dead. He should have recognized the danger, Huma decided. A lance was just as deadly to those who had, no matter whose hand controlled its path, and they outnumbered Huma's band 2-1. Bennett and the others came up alongside Huma. The apparent commander of the guardsmen, cloaked and wearing a visored helmet, topped with two wicked horns, signaled to the others. In alternating order, the red dragons rose or fell, creating two levels. Their strategy was immediately apparent. Whatever group Huma's men chose to attack, it would be left open to a second attack from the others. When the red dragons neared, Huma lifted both arms wide and then brought his hands together as if he were clapping. The knights split into two groups, one to the left, one to the right. The maneuver spread confusion through their opponents. The evil dragons hesitated, then their order began to crumble as each moved to protect its own flank from the deadly lances. Clustered together as they were, this proved more detrimental. Two red dragons collided with one another. Huma skewered another hapless creature. The others moved in. Speed was of the essence in this strike. The knights wasted no time or opportunity. Ducking a blast of flame from one ferocious red, the silver dragon brought Huma and the lance directly towards its underbelly. The dragon lance sank in without resistance, and the red dragon quivered. The rider, realizing his lance was useless at this angle, frantically pulled a bow from its back. He did not have time. His dragon convulsed and, to Huma's surprise, burst into flames, turning both man and Leviathan into ash. Huma had a brief glimpse of the commanding guardsman as the ebony-armored figure caught an unsuspecting gold dragon in the neck with one of the plundered lances. The dragon shook violently, pulling himself free from the dragon lance. The wound was deep. The gold dragon thrashed around, throwing his rider free. The wound seemed to erupt. There was nothing Huma could do for the helpless rider, for now the guardsman was turning his dragon towards him. The blood of the gold dragon dripped from the point of the lance, and Huma briefly noted that the weapon was stained, something that had never occurred before. Then both dragons were roaring, claws bared and jaws wide open in a terrifying display. Silver dragon met red dragon. Both lances were in perfect position to strike, and Huma saw no way to prevent the death of Gwyneth, as he was finally able to think of her. As the lances thrust forward, he uttered a single-word prayer to Paladin. The point of the stolen dragon lance touched the right side of the silver dragon's unprotected chest, and slid off the wing and shot past her, puncturing the lower membrane of her wing. Huma's lance continued through, piercing so deeply that it came out the back of the red dragon, and because of that, Gwyneth was forced to grapple with the dying creature so that they could free themselves. Her damaged wing made the task all the more difficult. The black-suited rider was no stranger to opportunity and unstrapped himself from the dying red and crawled quickly forwards. The silver dragon, busy with her counterpart, did not notice him until he had jumped onto her and behind Huma. By then, there was nothing she could do that would not imperil Huma. The attacker gripped her shoulder tightly and reached back to a sheath behind him. The sword he pulled from there was a massive, wicked weapon with tiny barbs all along the edges. Huma's own blade seemed woefully inadequate, but, lacking anything else, he turned and met the guardsman head-on. The two weapons struck together, and the knight's was almost pulled from his grasp as it was caught on the barbs. With a tremendous effort, the silver dragon at last freed herself from the massive corpse. Even as it spiraled towards the ground, she sought a way to buck the ebony-armored attacker, without losing Huma as well. Meanwhile, neither fighter had gained an advantage. Secure in the saddle, Huma was on a more stable base, but he could not turn easily. The guardsman, straddling the lower half of the dragon, was forced to stay his ground or risk losing his grip. He had no way to secure himself. The knight tugged violently at the bond securing him to his saddle, and crawled forwards to give himself some breathing room while he turned around. The other chopped with his jagged blade, but missed. Huma, now facing his opponent, reached across his saddle and struck a blow at the guardsman's side. His adversary parried the attack and caught Huma's blade in the barbs. They struggled, each attempting to wrest the other's sword away. This new struggle proved to be a fatal error for the guardsman. Huma's position allowed him to use both hands, the other could not. The Dark Knight reached up with his other hand in order to save his grip on his sword, lost his balance, and slipped from the silver dragon's back. He tried making a grab for her wings, but they moved out of reach, and the Black Guard commander could only clutch wildly at the air before plummeting out of sight, screaming. Huma looked upwards. Kaz and Bolt were looking down at the scene with mutual expressions of triumph. Surprisingly, the Dragonlancers had only lost the one man in battle. Huma gave thanks that no more than that had perished, but wondered what else lay ahead. Then the air began to shimmer all about them, and Huma, strapping himself back into the saddle, thought for a moment that they were all again under attack. The shimmering was disorienting, and a great chill accompanied it. The entire mountain range looked distorted, as if they were flying several directions at once. There was nothing Huma could do but hold on tight and pray that it would end soon. Perhaps Paladin had heard him, or perhaps they had finally reached the other side of whatever spell Drekos had cast, for the strange disturbance suddenly ceased, and when Huma opened his eyes again, the mountains were as they had been, save for one additional feature. A tall, massive black castle perched on the side of a jagged peak. The citadel of Galen Drekos, renegade and servant of Takesis, the Dragon Queen. The place of final victory, or everlasting defeat. So, we are page 336. Out of 379. So I think that is a good spot to leave us for tonight. And we will see if tomorrow I can finish off this book for you. So, I've been telling everybody today, if you get out of bed today, then despair, you don't have a problem with despair. Despair has a problem with you. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, I'm sure. So, in the meantime, do your best. Get some rest and do your best to become somebody that you can be proud of. And if people can hate you for no reason, then I can love you for exactly the same. And tell people that you love them.